From winning the first ever Rugby World Cup to becoming the most accomplished side at the great tournament, the Springboks are arguably the best team of the last decade. The team from Africa has not only surprised the world on many occasions, but they have a knack for showing the world who is boss when no one truly expects it. You can think of the early 20th century game between South Africa and Great Britain as a start, where a team of South African prisoners overcame the might of the English for the first time in a rugby game. But this is only the start, and the Springboks have now gone on to show the world who is boss. Today, we explore this world and look at 10 times the Springboks showed the world that South Africa is and will always be one of the greatest nations to play the game. The first moment takes us back to the 2009 British and Irish Lions tour of South Africa at number 10. For the first time, the world got to see the introduction of Maun Steyn and Jacques Fourie. Both would later become legends of the Springbok team. In what was described as an unbelievable test match, the Springboks opened up the series with a 26-21 victory over the Lions. However, they would wrap up the 3-match series as early as the second test, with the boot of Maun Steyn slotting a winner at Loftus Versfeld from distance. Whilst the Boks lost the final test at Ellis Park, controversy surrounded the suspension of Bakkies Botha and Schalk Burger, while the Boks made 10 changes to give more youngsters some playing time. But the All Blacks have always been a thorn in the Springbok side, and at number 9, we look at how they overcame New Zealand at Athletic Park. In the 1990s, the All Blacks were a dominant force, and with the Boks looking for a good and reliable coach, they had plenty of ups and downs. However, the 1998 clash between the two nations at Athletic Park showed that the Boks were a disciplined and patient side. Thanks to the brilliance of Joost van der Westhuizen, the Springboks would score the only try of the game, winning 13-3 as the All Blacks squandered every opportunity they had. The combination of Peter Rosso and Henry Honeyball proved to be a little too much for the men in black. However, more recently at number 8, the Boks defeated the home nation France with a single point at the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Arguably one of the best games of the Rugby World Cup took place in the quarter-final draw between the Springboks and Les Blues. A game that saw French captain Antoine Dupont return from a facial injury had many wondering if the Boks could overcome these odds. However, an exciting game unfolded, which saw a myriad of tries from both teams exchanging blows. However, as the game drew to a close, it was the Springboks who clinched the semi-final spot by a single point in the 29-28 showdown. Thanks to a brilliant charge down on Thomas Ramos from Springbok winger Cheslin Kolbe, the Boks managed to sneak through the playoffs. This showed that the Boks were a resilient side that could ultimately engage any opponent, no matter where the game was played. But the ferocious Springbok All Black rivalry is probably where the Boks continued to prove their dominance. Number 7 takes us to the House of Pain, where the All Blacks had never lost a game against the Springboks. The week prior saw New Zealand pick off the Boks by 19 points to 7 in Wellington, but the Boks had a point to prove at Carisbrooke. A game that was constantly on a knife edge unfolded, and the momentum swayed from one side to the other. However, the 75th minute proved fatal for the All Blacks. An unmarked Enrico January pierced the line, and with a chip kick that he regathered, the Springbok scrum half popped over to seal the game. A Maun Steyn conversion would seal the game, and even though the Boks didn't win the Tri-Nations, they proved that the House of Pain is nothing more than an old fort with broken walls. Whilst the All Blacks are the old foe, England has always remained the old guard, and games between these two nations have always been on a knife edge. Well, that was until 2002, when this was finally broken at number 6 on our list. As the Springboks do each year, they embarked on the end-of-year tour of the Northern Hemisphere. A game between the Red Roses and the Boks was scheduled to take place at Twickenham Stadium as the penultimate game of the tour for the Springboks. This didn't turn out well for the English. As the game kicked off, the English simply looked like they didn't want to play the game, and the Springboks were on fire as they were preparing for the 2003 Rugby World Cup in Australia. A score that no one saw coming erupted as the Springboks downed the English by a mammoth 53 points to just 3. Keep in mind that this was a game that featured the young Johnny Wilkinson, who would later become one of the best fly halves the game had ever seen. This didn't help the Springboks in the following Rugby World Cup, but certainly proved that Twickenham was not a good hiding spot for the English, and the Springboks were ready. As we count down into our top 5, the English feature once again, but this time it was in Japan at the 2019 Rugby World Cup, and the English were on a roll, dominating everyone in their path in the lead-up to the final. Many expected it to be one of the greatest games ever, which was a rematch of the 2007 Rugby World Cup in Paris. However, Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus was ready. With the English still reeling from a brutal semi-final against New Zealand, the Boks pounced and took advantage. In the end, South Africa ran out 32-12 victors and sealed the deal that would make them 3-time world champions. At number 4, we stick to the modern era, and this was a day of records. The Boks were to face the All Blacks in a warm-up game for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Whilst the game was held at Twickenham, many expected a close game between the old foes, and the game should have probably gone down to the wire. However, the Springboks had the return of their skipper, Siya Kolisi, who would go on to make a statement upon his return to the international stage. In a blowout, the Springboks ran in 5 tries and kept New Zealand to 0 points with just a few minutes left on the clock. Cam Roigard would ultimately sneak one in for the losing All Blacks, but the fat lady was already singing. The 35-7 dismantling of the All Blacks made the Boks one of the favourites going into the World Cup. Speaking of the World Cup, both foes would meet at number 3 on our list in the final of the most prestigious tournament in world rugby. Would history repeat itself? Whilst the 2023 Rugby World Cup was marred by controversy, it was the final that drew the most criticism. After a red card early in the match to All Black skipper Sam Cane, the All Blacks tried valiantly to get back in the game. The game itself was boring by many standards, and only a single try from the All Blacks got the fans cheering in the early parts of the game. However, the reliable boot of Handré Pollard would once again prove fatal for the All Blacks. New Zealand would lose the game by a single point, with the Springboks showing the world there is a reason they are the only team to have won 4 Webb Ellis trophies. At number 2, we have to look at one of the greatest comebacks in the history of the game. Another blow to the English as they had to endure a near-total collapse of form in the 2018 Winter Tour of South Africa. The Springboks didn't even look like they were at the game in the first 20 minutes, and thanks to Owen Farrell and co, England ran out to a 24-3 lead. However, the Boks found another gear, and by the 40-minute mark, South Africa was leading by 29 points to 27. The Springboks continued their assertion in the second half, ultimately winning the game 42-39 as the final whistle blew, showing their resilience. Number one can only go to one game, and that is the 1995 Rugby World Cup. After being banned from all international competitions for a couple of years, the third edition of the World Cup was to be held in South Africa. The All Blacks was a star-studded side, with the likes of Andrew Mertens, Christian Cullen and Jonah Lomu ready to take their second Webb Ellis trophy. However, Madiba magic kicked in, and thanks to the leadership of Francois Pienaar and the boot of Joel Stranke, the Boks won the game at the death in extra time. The final score, 15-12, and the Boks proved they belonged on the global stage. The Springboks are now a constant fixture at the international level and arguably the most accomplished team in history. However, their encounters with the likes of France and Ireland have always been fascinating. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so as not to miss the chance to see when France almost became world champions and showed the world who is boss.